Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues, and anybody who's listening in. And for those of you who might be a little bit confused, thinking to yourself, where were they yesterday on the Saturday show? Well, as we try to keep it a Saturday, every now and again, certain issues crop up and family always comes first. So we had a little family issue that we had to contend with yesterday, and we're now coming to you from Sunday morning. So the very first apologies have to go out to a young man called James, who thankfully is one of the frequent listeners who loves to listen to us whilst he's running. I don't know whether it makes him run faster, slower, or whatever. But
stop on his tracks.
But James, apologies, my friend, a little bit later than usual, but we're here. Steve, lovely to see you again.
Top of the morning to you, Chris.
Yep, always looking forward to it. Okay, and even though it's a little bit earlier than expected this morning, always a pleasure, my friend. So, Indeed. Another week in aviation. Bit of a stagnant week. Yeah, bit of a stagnant week. Nothing major apart from, as good surfers know, they can see a wave coming and now they know it's almost upon them and the wave is here. So we've been talking about this for some time. So we've got more pressures now, more uncertainty, more pullbacks, more reductions in capacity, more liquidity problems, increases in displaced personnel. So not the best of outlooks going into the winter period. We've got politicians looking as if they've just played 5 games on back-to-back and then had a good scrummage and they haven't come out very well. So they're looking very frazzled. So there's not a lot of freshness about, Stephen, or energy.
Except on the Saturday show, Chris. Good morning. There we go. There's the energy. I was just about to say,
and that's got nothing to do with people watching us if they're able to see us.
Well, you're right, Chris. Look, it was a bit of a slow news week. I say that, of course, with the sensitivity that there will still be those in our business that are sadly losing jobs and more. We saw some more announcements on that this week. Some smaller pockets of news coming out around that, but look, it was a slow news. But I think the most sort of standout item for me this week, Chris. It's interesting you mentioned about the capacity changes and as we move into winter, because the cumbersome behemoth of an organisation that is the European Commission finally got off their ass and did something this week, and they awarded they confirmed the issuance of the slot waiver, the airport slot waiver through to the end of winter 21. So that's around about to the end of March. The clocks change end of March 2021. So I think that was the most significant news. Now, what does that mean? Let's just sort of dig into it a little bit further. I suspect that for carriers that we name regularly on this show, the likes of Wizz, Ryanair, amongst others in the sort of the ultra low CC bracket, if you like, or category, is they will be quite disappointed by this news. And why is that? They'll be disappointed because their view, quite frankly and very candidly, has always been that why would you continue to protect airlines that are unfit to respond to this crisis, have required massive amounts of taxpayers' cash. I'm looking particularly towards Germany, like the Lufthansa Group. Amongst others, there are of course others. There's Air France, KLM, or whatever. But I think Lufthansa always be the biggest beneficiary. The Germans always liked, certainly the German politicians, not the German people, because the German people are a fine bunch of people. I've lived in Germany, Chris, as have you.
Yes.
The German politicians love to preach to the rest of the other 27 member nations, but not when it comes to themselves. The Germans tend to do their own thing. What that meant is that Lufthansa is an inefficient, bloated airline, has been for many a year. And whilst they have been, very successful carrier, they've done so dominating their markets. And they don't particularly like it when others have tried to encroach into some of the core markets. You've seen some of their competitive responses, particularly the likes of now Ryanair exiting some of their German hubs and so on and so forth. That really, Chris, is a result of years of really strong national support for the likes of Lufthansa, and what Ryanair and Wizz Air's gripe will be, and I'm sure EasyJet and amongst others, they will be suggesting that this is an unfair leg up to a carrier that now doesn't have to operate frequencies to maintain its presence on these or maintain its slot portfolio. And I think that's very unfortunate, because what you have seen is a really good, strong effort from the likes of Wizz Air to reconnect some of these markets, from the likes of Ryanair, and through no fault of their own, Ryanair having to claw back some of that capacity, but Ryanair, responding to customer demand when they see it, and potentially opening new routes or launching new destinations or additional capacity in aircraft basings in markets that they wouldn't have been in before. So airport slot waiver, I think, if I was sort of having to be rated as positive or negative, I'd be slightly towards the negative end of what does that mean for the industry as a whole. However, there are protections necessary for good reason. And it is through no fault of these airlines, not through no fault, I will rephrase that. In some parts, airlines needed to be slightly more nimble than they are today. And this has caught them off guard. They focused potentially on the wrong sort of levers historically of success. But what it does mean is that there are some protections that we can be sure, therefore, that when we see the return, in demand, is that the carriers will be able to use those slots, and they'll be there for them waiting when they return. So look, probably balanced, but I'm slightly towards the negative end of that. I'm a strong believer in carriers always maintaining their efficiencies and their being at top of their game with strong discipline. The ones that have done that are the ones here, unfortunately, like Ryanair and EasyJet, that will arguably lose out because of this slot waiver policy.
Yeah. But funny enough, we did a podcast with IATA, and we were covering the understanding of slots, and the fact that if you don't use them, you lose them, and if there are certain influencing factors, that it should be open, but it doesn't affect your overall commitment. So we had a really good podcast on that particular subject matter, which most people take for granted and that probably don't understand the mechanics behind it. But yes, right. But and then also, Stephen, now people are talking about this next 7 months. And, there's going to be a lot of pain, but this is also now a time where people should, as one of the sessions in our digital event, which is going out on the 22nd, 23rd and 24th next week. One of the sessions there was, and it was words from Stan Wraith. He said, this crisis is basically giving the industry the chance to pull back, claw back, change, address, update and correct all the mistakes that have been made over the last 10 plus years. So, maybe over these next 6-7 months, people are going to have to just review what they need to do now moving forward after this. On that, Steve.
It's never an option to get fat and happy, but certainly that is certainly what it feels like in some quarters over the last decade. I would agree with Stan. I think no surprise from you that I would agree with Stan's position there. But really, as we've said before, this is the opportunity now. People will seize it in different ways. But you're absolutely right, Chris. I think for too long, maybe there has been an element of complacency within our industry, dare I say.
Yeah, and also I think 100% with complacency, but also thinking that certain changes. So whether it's from the old days, moving to the consolidation, then the integrators, then e-commerce. It's almost as if we have to put up with it and we have to go along with it, and nothing's going to change. Well, so much has changed now, and I dare I say over the next 7 months, a lot more is going to come to the fore. So
just to add on that, we talk about we're looking for planned positives. I know you're continually seeking for the positives in there. The positives in there, Chris, are I guess that these changes that we've seen in the last 6 months, not in every part or every quarter. But a lot of the changes that we've seen have been really nimbly and agilely designed and implemented. And it just goes to show the amount of talent that's out there has been really creative in some of the responses to this. I just, really well hope now that that talent is retained as far as practically possible, because these businesses would not be able to be that nimble or that creative without these talented individuals in their organizations.
100%. But now, Steve, it's what do we do with that creative talent? How do you nurture some of the people that are coming up now? Because there's been a lot of people taking redundancies. There's a lot of people in the practical sizing. So some who never thought their careers would come that fast they're going to have to take on a lot more responsibility. So there needs to be a different type of training and coaching as well for some of these people, because they've got to deal with people with constant anxieties. Are they going to keep their jobs, lose their jobs?
That's right.
All these issues. So it's a new opportunity there, but one that needs to be carefully implemented, because there's a flood now of online training, and some of it is not that good, and it's not, you know, it's not coordinated, it's not regulated, and people are, in some cases, maybe a little bit desperate to try and pay money to see if they can get more skills, to see if they can get a job. We've got to be very careful with this, because, you know, that's the last thing you want, is for people to do things and not get any benefit from.
Yeah, I think within business, you say people are desperate to pay money to sort of, you know, retain or maintain skills and competencies. The other problem, Chris, is there has been an outpouring of experts creating new businesses on the back of this crisis, and really sort of knee-jerk response thinking, well, we can. I mean, the one that I look at was sort of all of these distributors that are now suddenly experts in ventilators.
Logistics. Yeah.
And now they're experts in nitrile gloves, and now they're experts in masks. And look, I'm all for sort of, you know, entrepreneurialism. But these little cottage industries that are created as a result are I think, on the whole, unhelpful.
Yeah, right. Well, there you go. That's a clear message. Now, one positive, and we touched on it last week. We gave Qatar and the chief a shout, but again, one of the news points that came out this week is that they're going to expand their network now to more than 90 destinations.
Well, I think he was talking last week about of contracting the network on the basis that he couldn't get a consistent and universal approach on testing and quarantine and the like. Yeah. With a particular bias on that old friend of mine, Australia. And we've seen the Australian government have come out this week. The Deputy Prime Minister, I think his name is Michael McCormack, has been making statements this week in the press that they are, the Australian government are now, you know, putting some pressure on the states to release some more capacity and remove some of those caps on arrivals. So look, I think when the chief speaks, people listen.
Yep, and he's got a lot more leverage, I think, than he ever thought he had.
Well, as I said, I mean, I'm due to fly next Sunday on Qatar Airways to London, and if it wasn't for Qatar Airways, I doubt I'd be going anywhere. Unlike most people in the world currently, I think if you're flying internationally long haul, you fly in Qatar, and what a great opportunity then Qatar have to capitalize on that. You know, as we move out of COVID and back into normal, not new normal, but normal. Yeah. I'm hoping that we can move into normal one day.
One day, but it's going to be a little while away. Now, another interesting thing, Steve, and it's something that I'm just now so surprised about, is so many airports, carriers, everybody now is almost, I'm not saying they are, but almost competing on the hygiene side and what they're doing with controls. And they're creating so many good options, but it's confusing the living daylights out of everybody else and the normal punter, the consumer. And one new one that's come up now, Abu Dhabi, with the electronic wristbands during quarantine. I mean, that was the response I was expecting from you. And now I'm waiting now from the tsunami of common sense that's going to come shooting out.
This is just becoming it's becoming a minefield, not only for airlines to navigate, but for their customers to actually comprehend what the bloody hell is going on. The second thing is the bureaucracy departments in all these governments around the world will be working overtime. So whilst, you know, most private citizens working for private enterprise are without jobs or relying on taxpayer-funded furlough, public servants working in, or civil servants working in government bureaucratic departments will be earning overtime, I'm sure. Because this is just nonsensical, Chris. The reality is we've seen the disparate approach, you know, bodies, I have to say, like IATA, like ICAO, have been unable to get their acts together sufficiently to command the influence or to command influence with governments across the globe.
Yep.
We only need 3 or 4 or 5 major economies or major markets to move on this. but they're so bloody minded and so narrow minded and parochial that they all want to do their own thing and they all think they're right. Well, we do know that that council of perfection that the former British Prime Minister Theresa May so eloquently described 2 weeks ago in Parliament does not exist.
Yeah, yeah.
So testing, there's been massive moves on testing in the last 2 weeks. The blunt instrument of quarantine is a very hard instrument, will not help restore travel. You've seen the effect of quarantine when quarantine, when green lanes suddenly become red lanes, and we don't know why they become red lanes. What's changed? Yeah. Where's your science? There's no science in this at all now, in my view, Chris. They are not using science. What they are doing is they're predicating on or building on people's fears, and they're just responding to negative media to demonstrate to their electorate. Let's remember, they're not doing it for the public, they're doing it to their electorate, because these bloody politicians in every environment, bar none, maybe with the exception of Sweden and Iceland, who seem to be doing things quite well, actually. I've noticed in the last couple of weeks, but there's this sort of hell-bent approach to politicians that they must be doing something. Actually, what you must do is allow industry to influence outcomes, to restore some of that confidence, to get passengers confident again in the system. When you continually change red to green and green to red, and as Michael O'Leary said this week about the Irish government, two things. One is the Irish government created the aviation task force, but the report from that task force that the Irish government created has been sitting on Minister Ryan's desk for the last 2 months unresponded to.
Yeah.
The second thing that O'Leary said was that there's been no evidence provided to the transport to the airline sector in Ireland to say why Greece, for example, went from being green 1 week to red the next, and then in 2 weeks' time it'll become green again.
Yeah.
So testing. We've said this many times. We've seen a lot of people come out about this. Everybody seems to be experts on testing. I wouldn't like to proclaim that. However, what I am certain of is that customers would much rather take a test before departure, potentially even a test a few days after arrival, day 4 or day 5, which seems to be the sort of the point right now in that process, because that's the number of days that people still shed the virus. That helps you establish some of the false negatives, and you can run an error rate. That's risk management. That's what we do across the board in aviation. It's what we do in life.
Yeah.
So I don't understand why this has not been listened to. I can't get my head around it. I can't fathom it. I just hope, really hope, because this is going to, as we go into winter, Chris, and typically airlines, certainly in the Northern Hemisphere, winter months are not pretty.
No.
And it's the summer catch that normally sustains them. So this one is going to bite. It's going to bite hard. And so nonsense like quarantine, electronic tags, all this crap that you keep seeing, I think is for the waste bin.
And there was a little news article about Africa and the Middle East, and IATA was, again, IATA now was pushing about the testing. And interestingly enough, one of the percentages or the figures was that, obviously the impact that the region remains in lockdown despite certain borders being open, but recent public opinion research showed that 88% of all travellers would not even consider travelling if quarantine measures were imposed on travellers at their destination. So that's virtually everybody, and unless people have got the comfort of knowing that when they get back or when they get wherever they're going, that's where they're happy to stay for those quarantine periods, nobody is going to start taking it up. And then 72% people surveyed agree that those who test negative for COVID should not have to quarantine. And that 80% of people feel that COVID-19 is sufficiently under control in their particular country to open borders. So I don't know, Steve, it's too much news, too much different opinion, and not enough consistency, which brings me now to some of the questions that we've got. And I've picked out some of the ones that obviously are supporting some of the things that we've been saying and also challenging us to a certain degree. But one of them is, and this one is from Phil, why do representative bodies not get together to help everyone and pool their resources, lead by example? Now, funny enough, during the digital event, we had a lot of people, and this came up quite a bit. So now, if you look at I mean, not because of this, but if you look at lots of the organisations, so TIACA now have Vladimir stepping down. You've got Glyn stepping down in IATA. So you've got practical sizing for whatever reason, whether it's voluntary redundancy, whether it's just natural change or whatever. There's a lot of change happening and there's a lot of displacement. So with all these representative bodies, if they are representing the industry they're in, they're going to contract with their numbers, contract with their specialists, contract with the exercises or the support services or the ideas or whatever it is, policies that they're trying to push across. At the end of the day, they're not the ones who make the decisions, it's the regulators. So what could happen now is all of these representative bodies could come together, could identify what the critical areas are as far as support or discipline that's necessary within the industry, and start sharing out those particular workloads and combining their workload, and then being very supportive or driving the regulators who come out with the recommendations. So instead of a recommendation then gets poo-pah'd and transferred and debated, etc., and not followed, this is a chance now to really bring everybody together and start to focus on the must-dos or the shall-dos, okay, rather than if you would like, or we consider this to be the best. Now is the time to be more firm in the requirements. What do you think?
I think your dogs have got something to say on that point, Chris. Sounds like they're quite vocal there.
They are indeed. They know where I am. They know where they are. What I am. Yeah.
Yes, I guess. Look, I'm a bit sceptical on this. A couple of reasons. One is, I guess Phil is suggesting that is a potential solution to some of this impasse that we are in. I mean, I guess it is a bit of an impasse because we haven't. There is no clear path forward, and there is if this was sort of like a Wild West movie, this sort of standoff between the two until the two. I'm saying industry and regulator, because we haven't yet reached any degree of amicable arrangements between industry and its regulators. And we said this from the beginning, Chris. I think from March we were suggesting this was the right thing to do, but we've seen very little evidence of it. The second thing is, I would say, we have the situation of multiple member countries in Europe with one regulator.
Yeah.
One air safety regulator, one security. So we've got EASA and we've got ECAC. Yeah. And even those jokers don't have any uniformity. So the lobby groups, I mean, IATA sits in Geneva. Not really sure where the powered seat is these days in IATA, in Montreal, Geneva, but that's another discussion. The European Commission is sitting there in Brussels, and EASA is in the Netherlands. So I'm not quite sure why, a situation where it was designed, the 27 member states of the European Union cannot get their acts together. It seems that they've all gone to become little Napoleons in their own markets. So rather than use the benefit of a union, what's the point of a union if there's no uniformity? So question whether you want to be in a club that is not uniform or outside the club doing your own thing. So I would say where you've got these lobby groups and they've got strong presence and they've got strong capability, or they've got presence. Capabilities are questionable based on what you're saying, Chris, on talent, exit, and so on. But why not start with some of the easy ones? The easy ones surely would be where we've already got. There's a contiguous border around the whole of those Schengen member states. Wouldn't that be the easy place to start? No, it seems the hammer's gone down, the borders have closed. There is no discussion between the Schengen states to get regular air bridges between other nations. I haven't seen any success come out of the likes of IATA or ICAO in managing that exists today. So the question really back to those groups is, if you want to have some teeth and show your teeth rather than be this toothless tiger, why not start with the easy one? So the US is a country of nearly 500 million people. That's one border. It's one. But all the states are doing their own different things, Chris. Yeah. The country of Australia down the road from me here, 25 million people, but seven states, all doing their own thing. New South Wales, Queensland, Victoria, Canberra, you know, so ACT, etc., etc. So I don't know that actually that these bodies have got the clout that they perceive they do. I think where the clout lies is potentially where you've got state-owned carriers, state and investment or state-owned in some way, shape, or form, the likes of France, Netherlands, Italy, etc. You know, there should be the ability for the state and their companies, the firms that they're invested in the outcomes and invested in equity perspective, to actually try and make this bloody thing work, but they don't even do that. So I'm at a little bit of a loss, as you can hear, without wanting to sound I'm not having a rant or sort of rambling rather, not rabbling, maybe a rabble as well. Could do that probably some other time. Is we've got to get back to the facts, get back to what let's stop treating everybody like experts. Let's stop just the health professionals being the ones with a voice at the table. Let the economists and the travel experts and travel officials get a seat at that top table as well.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. But I think the principle was that now that everybody's being affected, it's a chance now to look where you are, what your capabilities are, what your resources are, consolidate, prioritise, and then focus on the critical ones which would benefit the industry in this next.
That all sounds wonderful, Chris, but you can't do any of that without government support.
I agree. But this is the point. You know, everybody wanting to have their say, on everything. It's far better just to prioritise what's critical, what's important, what's recommended. Focus on the critical, not all the other stuff.
I mean, aviation seems to have gone by the wayside. I mean, when people look at actually the effect and the multiplier effect of aviation, they said before it varies from something around 2.5 to 7 times multiple, dependent on market, country, and type of customer. And also the huge reliance. I mean, I was looking for a client this week, Chris, to get a slot on a ship, stand a container on a ship. I mean, these ships are bloody full for weeks.
They're full, mate, and they're not all being offloaded completely. So some poor people's containers are sailing around the world till it gets a chance to get back again and get offloaded.
I mean, it's
because of all the restrictions.
Yeah. So
listen, I've got a little bit of a. This is a bit of tongue in cheek here, but Lucy sent me a message. She said, "Steve Dickson sounds like Ewan McGregor," and she was listening to I don't know what it was about. Apparently, Ewan McGregor and his riding partner Charlie
Borman. I was watching it last night. That's Long Way Down.
The what? Sorry, what is it?
The Long Way Down.
The Long Way Down. And she said. She said, have the two of us thought of doing a bike ride and covering issues once the borders open up? I don't know whether she just wants to get rid of us, but anyhow, you sound like Ewan McGregor. So there's a little...
I'm flattered, but I don't know. I wish I fell into that bracket. I'm speechless for a change, Chris.
You are, yeah. Me too, because I've been called a right Charlie many times, and now I'm your Charlie. Anyhow, next question, right? And this one I know we've spoken about and we've covered it on the show. Terry, with everybody now being affected, why do smaller organisations not get together and consolidate and pool their resources, pool their specialisations, and all then get a central benefit and a structure? Now, that's something close to both of our hearts, Steve. And also, again, during one of the sessions on the digital event, that came up from many people, and one person in particular, Olivier Bajui. So he was saying as well, now maybe is the chance for people to come together and do what's best for a bigger group rather than struggling as an individual.
I think so. I think the power of influence and the power of scale is going to matter a lot going forward, Chris. It's I've come across, as you have, I'm sure many of our listeners will have done, really excellent handlers, ground handlers or terminal operators or whatever in various parts of the world. But they might sort of trickle along and they do all right, and they got the odd decent contract here or there. But a couple of things. One is procurement's always skeptical of kind of smaller firms and meeting their meaning the corporate kind of governance standards, despite what the operational team might say or view otherwise. The other thing is, through no fault of their own, it's very difficult for these guys to invest, in all the clubs that these guys are members of, the big boys. And this is the big boys. I think some of the WFS or the Donatas or the Menzies and others. So I think there's something to be said, Chris, about, and we've touched on this before, about some form of cooperation across the groups, and that means that the larger firms, the big boys, they bring a lot to the party in terms of intellectual property, but also competencies, capabilities, relationships, lobbying capability, etc., that the small guys just don't have. But would the likes of Donata invest in a startup in a small city or small airport in Sihanoukville in Africa, or in Abuja, or in possibly not? They might well do. I'm sure Stuart might give us some feedback on that directly. But is that a realistic consideration of prospect at this time? At this time, based on the known knowns? No, I don't think so. Therefore, why not create some form of infringement rather than disenfranchisement, but infringement around it? I'm not saying franchising models, but something around that creates that stable structure that actually extends the network possibility of some of these guys, but also gives some leg up to the smaller guys, because actually that's what we all need right now, is a bit of a leg up. And I'm not saying latching onto the coattails of somebody else's success. That's not what this is about. It's actually about contributing on a community level, Chris. I think that's important. So
exactly. It's that community issue. Yeah. So it's not then like a previous club that have been tried and tested and has certain services. This is about core service optimization from within a community, whereby people identify either their strengths or their opportunities and then do it together. So that community collaboration issue. Exactly. So on that note, anybody who's interested in that, or anybody's got any comment on it, please feel free to send me any messages or suggestions or comments to chris@evaint.com, and be very, very welcome. Now, for others, there's been quite a few complaints this week, Steve, about certain handling practices and certain changes, etc., and the impacts it has on customers. We got a lot from drivers and people who are very frustrated. So there was more than I expected, but we'll cover that issue subject to how things calm down over the next few weeks, because obviously when contracts change, things do change as well. Now, on another question that came in, which was from, this one's from, we've done Martin's one about the training. This one's Joyce about the waivers here. Why are carriers and airports still trying to sell on the hygiene issue instead of all getting together and looking at what is necessary and being guided by the scientists or by the specialists?
Look, very good point. I don't support any sort of differentiation of standards. I saw something last week that really sort of riled me, which was, the question was, would you pay more for a sterile cabin area with an in-flight janitor and seat free next to you and ... And I got quite exercised by this, because I was saying, look, once again, we are at risk of prejudicing the haves versus the have-nots. And what I mean is, there are a lot of people that have access to healthcare, and there are those that don't. Should we treat them differently in the response to COVID? There are those that can afford to fly in business class, Chris, and those that can't. But those that can't are being bumped by airlines because of caps, state caps, not airline caps, state caps. So airlines obviously take the more premium customers over the economy customer. I say, look, this is another ridiculous example that we need to be very careful of and stay well away from. In my view, Chris, no, there should be no differentiation in terms of standards. However, that said, when you are a private enterprise, or you're a private airline, without necessarily access to state funding or state support or whatever, you have to do everything within your means possible to keep your head above the water.
Yeah.
Because once you drop below the waterline, that's it. It's game over.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily defend carriers trying to do their own thing. What I would say is that at a time when governments have been so weak, lobby groups have been inept and slow to act. The only right thing for carriers to do is to try to re-engage on the customer's confidence, or restore customers' confidence, re-engage that customer with the airline. We saw some of those great early videos from the likes of Wizz Air and Cebu Pacific, sort of around the standards and what they were doing. I think that's all absolutely fine. Should we have customers in the same aircraft differentiated by sterile class and non-sterile class? Absolutely not.
Yeah. Okay. Clear. Yeah, because there's so many things that people could do, and rather than have this pick and mix, all it does again is confuses people. It's crazy.
Well, some airlines, for example, have been asking, you must have a COVID test to fly with us.
Yeah.
Yeah, but my destination doesn't require it. Yeah, but we do.
Yeah.
Oh, but I flew last week on British Airways and they didn't even require a mask or a COVID test.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway.
All right, my friend. Well, look,
I'll be flying next Sunday on a long journey. So, unless there are any changes to the borders in the UK, in which case, if they go into lockdown, I will not be travelling. And there's a real life example of my decision based on my need to work and be productive in the UK. If I can't do that, then I'll stay put.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I, for one, hope to see you, because it would be nice if we were able to.
We've got a lot of work to do, Chris.
Exactly, and a live show, perhaps socially distanced, but a live show.
Socially distanced? Oh dear. Right. Okay.
No, we can still do. We can still do that.
We don't do much of that here in Malaysia. We seem to be getting on just fine. Everybody wears a mask instead.
Yeah. No. I'm happy with the masks. Got one right here, Steve, just in case things
I've got my pile of freshly laundered masks. Here they are.
Yeah. No, it's amazing what you can do with old underwear, Steve. That looks really good, son.
There wasn't much material on this one, so.
Yeah. Anyhow, listen, we're nearly at the end of another week. Okay, and there was another point brought up about how to keep people involved now over the next 7 months. So this issue is something that we'll take up next week. I hope to have some answers on that as well, about what can be done for people who've been displaced. As always, Steve, it's a pleasure. Great to see you again, and in fine fettle. And as we started with James, we'll end with James. So James, sorry about disrupting your running schedule yesterday, but if anything, we're getting you fitter, because now you can go out and run today with this one as it goes out. Thanks again, Salem. Thanks for your flexibility, lovely boy. And we'll see everybody next week. Well done,
Thanks
Steve.
a lot, Chris. Have a good week. Cheers. Bye-bye.
You too.